Anonymous, written by Tony Angelo. The humid embrace of New Orleans clung to me like a familiar ghost, heavy with the scent of beignets and bourbon, the distant wail of a trumpet echoing through the French Quarter. 50 years older than when I'd last been here, a wide-eyed girl accompanying my parents on some long-forgotten family reunion, I was now a widow in her late 60s, taking a Caribbean cruise, a solo adventure meant to shake off the lingering dust of grief and rediscover the vibrant hum of life. Surprisingly, my cabin on the Southern Belle was spacious, the porthole allowing a tantalizing glimpse of the mighty Mississippi. I unpacked slowly, arranging my travel journals on the small desk, a ritual I'd adopted since my husband Richard's passing. Each one a testament to the places I'd been, the insights gained, quiet observations of a life lived. It was a comforting form of self-communion. The ship hummed that first night with an almost fevered intensity. I gravitated toward the piano bar, where a considerable talent was ringing soulful blues from the grand piano. I sank into a velvet armchair, a Sazerac warming my hands, and let the music wash over me. And that's when I saw him. He was leaning against the mahogany bar, tall and silver-haired, with a laugh line etched deep around eyes that held a familiar spark. A glass of amber-colored liquid was held in his hand, and he hummed along, a peculiar, slightly off-key tune that snagged at some forgotten corner of my memory. He caught my eye, and a slow, easy smile spread across his face, revealing a slight gap between his two front teeth, a gap I hadn't seen in half a century. My heart did a curious lurch. It couldn't be. "Excuse me," I said, my voice a little breathless as I approached. "This might sound incredibly strange, but do you happen to be a Mancini?" His eyebrows, silver as his hair, shot up. "I am. Tony Mancini. And you, my dear, look like you know a secret." He squinted, his gaze scrutinizing, then widened. "Wait a minute. That dimple when you smile. Tina?" My own name, spoken by him after 50 years, was like the peal of a church bell that had not rung for years. "Tony, oh my goodness, it's really you!" We stood there a moment, two strangers suddenly connected by threads spun from a distant past. The last time I'd seen Tony, he was a gangly teenager, all elbows and knees, with a mischievous grin. I was a few years younger, an imaginative child who adored her older cousin. After our grandparents died, our families had drifted apart, life taking us in different directions, across states, across experiences. We found a quieter corner and ordered another round. His a neat bourbon, mine the same Sazerac. The hours flowed, the cruise ship's gentle sway, a rhythmic underscore to our unfolding stories. He had become an architect, his specialty, historical restoration. I'd been an art historian, curating exhibitions, lecturing on forgotten masters. "Isn't it amazing?" I mused, taking a sip of my drink. "I've always been drawn to the echoes of the past, the stories buildings tell." Tony chuckled. "Tell me about it! My living room looks like an archaeological dig sometimes. I swear!" The ghosts of old builders whisper blueprints to me in my sleep. That was just the beginning. The next few days were a revelation of uncanny parallels. We'd both lost our spouses within a year of each other, navigating the profound emptiness that followed by immersing ourselves in travel. We both collected vintage postcards, not for the images, but for the faded handwriting, the slice of history they encapsulated. Tony even had this habit of twirling his wedding band on his finger when lost in thought, a habit I'd noticed Richard had, and one I did with my own, though mine was now on a chain around my neck. "You won't believe this, Tony," I said one afternoon on the Lido deck, sharing a plate of grilled shrimp. "But after Richard passed, I started taking sailing lessons. Always wanted to, never had the time or the nerve." His fork clattered against his plate. "You're kidding. Me too. I got a little sloop back in Mobile. The Wanderer. It's my escape." We burst out laughing. The sheer improbability washed over us. It wasn't just that we shared interests. There was a deeper resonance, an answering approach to life, a quiet understanding passing wordlessly between us. We'd both faced similar challenges, made similar choices. It was as if our lives, though separate, had followed parallel tracks converging now on the winding currents of the Caribbean. The soft part began subtly, an unspoken acknowledgement. The way his hand lingered on mine as he passed me a menu. The way his gaze held mine that fraction of a second too long. the quiet intimacy of late-night conversations on the promenade deck under a canopy of stars. He had a way of listening that made me feel entirely seen, entirely understood, and I found myself drawn to his quiet strength, his gentle humor, the glint of adventure in his eyes. One evening, after dancing under a disco ball that cast shimmering light across the floor, he walked me back to my cabin. The air was heavy with the smell of the sea and something else, something electric. We stopped at my door, the silence stretching between us, punctuated only by the distant thrum of the ship's engines. "Tina," he began, his voice a low rumble. This is more than just rediscovering a cousin, isn't it?" I met his gaze, my heart fluttering like a captive bird. "No, Tony, it isn't." He stepped closer, his hand reaching to cup my cheek, his thumb stroking my skin gently. 50 years, he murmured, his eyes searching mine. 50 years, and I feel like I've known you my whole life, yet I'm just discovering you. His lips were soft, tentative at first, then more confident, a kiss tasting of salt and longing, of shared history and a blossoming future. It wasn't the fiery passion of youth, but something deeper, warmer, more profound, a comfort born of experience, tenderness forged in the crucible of time. With every mile, our relationship felt deeper. We made our way through Cozumel's bustling markets, snorkeled the turquoise waters off Grand Cayman, and toured San Juan's historic forts. My hand fell naturally into his, our shoulders easy against one another. There was an unspokenness, a quiet contentment in the simple act of being together, the navigation of this crossroads chapter. It began in Key West. We were meandering through this really funky antique shop, the air thick with the scent of old wood and forgotten stories. Tony, ever the history dog, was poring over a dusty maritime map. I, on the other hand, was drawn to a little tarnished silver locket nestled amongst the costume jewelry. It was heavy, with intricate engravings of swirling patterns that seemed vaguely familiar. On a whim, I bought it. Back on board, I attempted to open it, but it would not budge. Tony was intrigued and borrowed a jeweler's loupe from the gift shop. He took a closer look at the engraving. "Tina, come see this!" These are not just swirls for decoration. See these patterns here? They're stylized letters. And this little emblem here, it's an extremely old crest. I think it's a variation of the Mancini family crest, from our great-great-great-grandfather's side, the one that was a sea captain. My eyes widened. The one who supposedly had a knack for resourceful trading? I remembered hearing whispers from my grandmother about him. Tony grinned. The very same, Lorenzo Mancini. He was more privateer than merchant, if the family legends are to be believed. He carefully worked at the locket's clasp with a miniature pick. With a soft click, it sprang open. Inside, nestled against faded velvet, was not a photograph, but a tightly folded piece of paper, brittle with age. Tony, being ever the careful one, unfolded it with tweezers. It was a crude, hand-drawn map, dotted with symbols and what looked like an old Spanish cipher. At the bottom, in faded ink, was a signature, L. Mancini. "Well, I'll be," Tony breathed. "It looks like great-great-great-grandpa Lorenzo left us a little mystery." A series of islands were on the map, some identifiable as Caribbean stops on our cruise, others less clear. There were cryptic phrases in Spanish and a sequence of numbers and letters. It was a treasure hunt, tailored for us, it seemed. "This is extraordinary," I murmured, a thrill running through me. "After all these years, a direct link to our adventurous ancestor. What do you think it's for?" Lorenzo was notorious for hiding his more valuable acquisitions from the authorities, Tony explained, his eyes sparkling with a familiar fascination I now recognized in myself. Sometimes it was gold, sometimes just personal letters, valuable documents, but it was always something he held dear. The rest of the days on the cruise became a fascinating game of amateur sleuthing. We pored over the map, cross-referencing it with modern charts and historical material. The Spanish phrases were tricky, but with my background in art history, I'd picked up enough Latin-based languages to help. Tony's architectural mind, trained to see patterns and structures, was invaluable in deciphering the cipher. One clue led us to a date, another to a constellation, and another to a particular type of tree, found only on one of the smaller, less frequented islands on our itinerary. Dominica, an island of lush rainforests and volcanic peaks. The ship was scheduled for an excursion there, a hike to a waterfall. With this locket and the now deciphered map in hand, we ventured onto Dominica. The heat and humidity were extremely high, but these did little to deter us. The map directed us away from the more mainstream tourist trail and down a narrow, overgrown path that seemed to call to us. "Are you sure about this, Tony?" I inquired, swatting at a particularly insistent mosquito. He paused, a slight smile on his face. "Lorenzo wasn't one for easy paths, sweetheart. Besides, if we've learned anything in the past week, it's that we're meant to follow these kinds of whispers." We pushed through thick foliage, alive with the sounds of the rainforest. Finally, we arrived at a small clearing dominated by an enormous ancient kapok tree whose roots twisted like some giant sculpture. This was it. One of the symbols on the map matched a distinctive knot in the tree's bark. Following the next clue, we looked near the roots. Tony's keen eyes spotted a loose rock, half hidden by moss. He carefully dislodged it, revealing a small dry cavity. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a small wooden box, weathered by time but perfectly intact. Tony opened it with shaking hands. There, nestled on a bed of dry leaves, wasn't gold, but a pile of leather-bound journals, the twin, in effect, to those I kept, and a small, exquisitely carved wooden bird. The journals were unmistakably Lorenzo's. They were filled with his calligraphic scrawl, detailing his many voyages, his loves, his philosophical musings, and his resourceful trades. The bird was an extraordinary piece of folk art, a small, bright parrot, carved in such detail it seemed ready to take flight. "He wrote down everything," Tony whispered, turning the pages of a journal. "His adventures, his thoughts. It's like a window to his soul." I picked up the wooden bird, running my thumb over its smooth surface. "And this is beautiful. A piece of art. A symbol of freedom and connection to these islands he loved." This wasn't a search for pirate's treasure. It was about finding something much more valuable, a deeper understanding of our shared heritage and tangible connection to the adventurous spirit that so obviously ran through our veins. In the process, it solidified the extraordinary connection we'd found in each other. Back on the ship, now steaming towards the Louisiana coast, the setting sun painting the sky in fiery hues, Tony and I sat on the deck, the wooden bird between us. We had spent hours reading excerpts from Lorenzo's journals, marveling at his life, recognizing the echoes of ourselves in his words. He wrote about how important it was to seize life, to embrace the unexpected, I said, quoting a passage. How every journey, planned or unplanned, holds a discovery. Tony reached for my hand, interlacing our fingers. "He never knew how prophetic he was, did he? His map led us to his story, and his story, in a strange way, led us to ours." The cruise ended, bringing us back into the humid arms of New Orleans. Yet neither of us felt that sad touch of leaving. We came as strangers, carrying ghosts of the past with us, and we left hand in hand, having found not only a long-lost cousin, but also a long-lost love, an unexpected adventure, and a vibrant future. "So what's next, Tina?" Tony asked as we stood on the dock, the Southern Belle looming behind us. I squeezed his hand, a warm smile spreading across my face. "Well, Captain Mancini," I said, looking into his sparkling eyes, "I hear Mobile has a rather charming little sloop called the Wanderer, and I have a new journal just waiting to be filled." He laughed, a rich, full sound that filled me with joy. "Sounds like a grand adventure, my dear. One I wouldn't miss for anything." 50 years and a lifetime apart, we had finally found our way back to each other. Our parallel lines converged into a beautiful, unexpected journey, ready to chart a new course together. And it felt like we were just getting started.